Security was tight today in Beijing on the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. There was no official commemoration in the Chinese capital. Visitors gathered to watch the flag raising as they do every day. But in 1989, Chinese troops opened fire in the square, ending a student-led protest for democracy. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people were killed. Ontario Independent Liberal Senator Jim Munson was in Tiananmen Square 30 years ago. He joins me now. Hi, Senator. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Vash.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. On what I imagine is kind of a difficult day. Take us back. What was it like?
I'm still haunted by the image of what I saw. I've been asked that question a few times, and I still have the image in front of the Beijing Hotel just adjacent to the Tiananmen Square on Shanghan Avenue, and to see the young people being shot, helping to pick them up actually in the bodies and put them on these trishaws, these bicycles, these three-wheel bicycles, and then being moved to a morgue in the Beijing hospital. You had a difficult time trying to cover a story, keep your emotions, and at the same time watching basically children, young students die in front of you, shot, crushed by tanks. I remember one gentleman who was yelling, he was an older person, and he was yelling, Minzu wan sui, Minzu wan sui, long live democracy. And I told my crew and my colleague Roger Smith that we got to jump to the side, and we did. And that gentleman was crushed. So a voice was silenced in a second. And then we had to go into the square. And as I was running to the square, from the shadows there was a gentleman who just yelled, please tell the world what's going on. It's hard to imagine today, no digital issues at all, no Instagram, you name it, all those things.
There weren't a lot of mechanisms to get that message out.
Nobody's getting that message out. We had to actually send our tapes out with some students to Hong Kong and to Tokyo, and with diplomats who hid some of the tapes on themselves to get that message out. There were a few feeds, but they too were being intercepted by the Chinese government, because if you fed from the hotel in Beijing, they could see the people who you were talking to, what you were trying to do, and so on. So it was a very, very difficult time.
Did it change your outlook on, the way in which the world interacts, or just the way, just your own personal change you? Did it change you?
It changed a bit of my objectivity at that particular time, because then all of a sudden you felt that you were trying to be a voice for the students, trying to find that balance, and where was that balance? You have to remember at that particular time that there was a fight, ideological fight in the Communist Party going on in the Great Hall of the People. The hardcore leader, Li Peng, the premier, was up against Zhao Ziyang, the communist director general of the Communist Party. Mr. Zhao was a moderate. He was trying to plead to go easy on the students. We can clear the square sometime. They had already met. He lost that battle. So the paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, who led the openness in China, he gave the order for the soldiers to crack down, and Premier Li Peng won the day. The hardliners won the day. So I always imagine what would have been like if it had gone the other way. Mr. Zhao, he was pleading with the students days before in the square to leave, because he knew what was going to happen. He actually wept. And you have to remember 2 days before, or the day before, on June 3rd, Beijing still felt like a liberated city. They were actually feeding the soldiers that night, because those soldiers are unarmed, because those soldiers looked so bewildered. There was dissent in the military. Not everybody wanted to go in and do the job that eventually took place. And so when it happened, I think there was disbelief. But can you imagine being in Beijing a few days beforehand, millions of people in the square and marching to the square, doctors, lawyers, religious leaders, labor people with the students? There was a sense of euphoria. And I don't think they were looking for democracy the way we look at democracy. They were looking at corrupt practices. They were looking to have a voice, a say in what they can or cannot do in their studies and how they live their lives. It wasn't that complicated. And so to this day, 30 years later, yes, I have that image, but I always have the thought, what could have been? And where would China be today? And where China is today, to me, I don't want to go on about this, but I love China, and I love the Chinese people. I have a difficult time with this regime.
What does it tell you that, even the level of censorship right now around what happened at Tiananmen Square?
Well, it tells me what happened in Tiananmen Square. That shaped what's happened today. Even though China is an economic giant, and as Deng Xiaoping said, it's glorious to get rich through hard work. Well, the hard work has not been done when it comes to human rights, the rights of the individual. Take a look at the minority. When we talk about minorities in this country, they're small numbers. We're talking about millions of Uyghurs in Xinjiang province in the northwest of China of ethnic descent, Islamic descent, and they are shut down. They can't say anything. They are being taken to education camps, don't think that way anymore. Tibetans don't have a voice. And even in Hong Kong, where it's still supposed to be one country, two systems, slowly democracy is being diminished and squeezed, out of that system there. There is self-censorship. And if you walk today in Beijing, or you walk anywhere, if you're a Chinese person living in North America and the rest of it, you do still live in fear that you're being watched and monitored by the government, because this government is not taking any chances with anybody.
What about the 2 detained Canadians when you hear about Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor?
I really feel for those 2 gentlemen. They're innocent. And what the government does is the government's business. I'm sure there's all kinds of back channel things that are going on. But in the present atmosphere that we live in, I guess we have to move beyond Tiananmen, because I have to speak to honor the dead. I have to speak on behalf of those mothers today in Beijing who cannot grieve publicly for a lost daughter or son. That's horrible. As far as the 2 Canadians are concerned, let's just hope that common sense prevails soon and they're allowed to come home.
Do you think, given what you're describing, do you think the West needs to take a harder line when it comes to human rights with China? I mean, you talk about the economic weight of
We
China.
have every right as a sovereign nation to talk about human rights in China or in any other country. I talked one time to a Chinese diplomat who said to me, we won't interfere in your work with the indigenous people and some of the suffering that they have gone through. Well, I said, well, why not? Because they have gone through suffering. We're not trying to hide anything. We've done some pretty brutal things ourselves in our lives. And we have to stand up for it and own it. And deal with that issue. So why can't we talk about each other? There are no borders when it comes to the rights of a person. And so when I think of what Beijing is like today, when I think of history being erased, the idea that people in China by the millions don't even know what happened, and if they do, they won't talk about it. It's called quietly 6/4, like 9/11, yes. 6, June and 4th of June, but nobody will talk about it. You just have to hope that within that society, with the new China, with the well-educated middle class that have been educated in the West and other parts of the world, that some spark is going to light again. And it doesn't have to be a demonstration. It just has to be a small spark to say, we have rights. We should be allowed to speak. We should have a fair judicial system. And we should have a role in government. A one-party totalitarian system does not work.
Okay, I have to leave it there. Thank you, Senator Munson. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Vashi.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.